Hello and good evening. My name is Luke Stearns, and this is my screencast presentation of my report on executive security and its comparison with comparing and contrast with another form of security. For this report, I chose to discuss and compare executive security with watch and guard security, and the reason why I chose that is watch and guard security. It covers many different facets, but it's something that I've explored a lot throughout this class and actually wrote a couple of reports on it, specifically watch and guard security in the form of campus security. So I felt very comfortable discussing it, and I also found that it has a lot of similarities to executive security and differences enough as well. Now, as I wrote in the paper, I feel that the best way to go forth with this report before discussing the comparisons and the differences between the two forms of security, it's important to discuss first what specifically these varieties of security cover. Now, being that the paper centers on executive security and a comparison with it, I started with executive security first. Now, as it is written, the actual definition as far as the duties for executive security is to provide security to a person who has a high potential of being the target of an assassination, a kidnapping, or an assault. So by definition, executive security and the operatives within executive security handle clients that are of somewhat of a high danger risk because of their employment status or basically how important they are. Now, one of the most popular forms, or I shouldn't say forms, but one of the most popular varieties, if you will, of executive security, and realistically the first example of executive security, is the United States Secret Service, which aids executive security to the president. Now, on a general level, and segueing into that, executive security encompasses three modules, and either they can encompass one of them or operate within one of them or a number of them. The first of which would be a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week protection. This type of protection will generally be considered at like the client's residence, and this could either be at the person's house, or as we were talking about the Secret Service, it could even be the White House. The second module of executive security is VIP protection, and this is the executive security that we see at movie premieres. When they're on the red carpet, you see the guys with the earpieces and then the suits, and this would be again an example of celebrity protection. You know, very often the things that we see on TV or in movies. Now, the third module centers on situations where there has specifically been a threat. And the example that I pulled from our text is described as a specific threat to an executive or manager by a disgruntled employee or customer following from a plant shutdown, termination or layoff of employees, or personal action by the organization. So here, once again, we see the modus operandi, if you will, of executive security having the duty to focus primarily in a high-risk situation with a high-risk clientele. Now, as I said before, the security that I chose to compare to executive security is watch and guard. Now, there are plenty of examples of watch and guard security, two examples of which are security companies, two of which are Guardsmark and Securitas. And by definition, they are used to provide monitoring and physical control of company perimeters, buildings, and parking lots. These are the guys that you see operating in company buildings, running the metal detectors, patrolling outlet malls either in vehicles or on foot, and more specifically for college students, and college students that are on campuses specifically, these are the security guards that you see walking around. The guards that you find on college campuses, they're not police officers per se of a local police department. They are hired by a company as security operatives, if you will, specifically for that location. And in the same regard, with if their employment is with a college campus, that includes the campus, that includes the parking lots, and that includes anything realistically that is owned by the college as well. So with that said, the watch and guard type of security is arguably probably more publicly interacted with than executive security on that level. So now that we have a basic idea of the definitions between executive security and watch and guard, we can start going into the comparing and the contrasting of the two. Now, yes, it is true that watch and guard security is probably more publicly interacted with than executive, but realistically, both types of security are observed by the public quite often. Like I said before, executive security, those are the guys in the suits and the dark glasses that we see at the movie premiere on TV, at the red carpet premieres. And they're the ones that are accompanying or escorting celebrities at parties. And the watch and guard security officers are the guys that we see in the uniforms walking down the sidewalk at the outlet mall. Now, as I said, in that beginning comparison and how we see them, we see the first difference between them. When we see executive security, they dress, it depends. It depends on the situation. Sometimes they may be in a more tactical attire, if you will, but more often we find them in very straight-laced, dark suits, suit and ties, dark glasses, and any variety of the two. Watch and guard security we see more often in security uniforms that are somewhat comparable to police uniforms. They're not the same, but you can recognize them immediately as security officers. Now, to training, it's important and most definitely a requirement for both types of security. That being said, the focus is just a little bit different, and it's different when you compare what each security type is used for. For example, physical agility is important on both ends, but it's applied in a different way. Watch and guard security officers, I discovered through my research, actually go through a fairly vigorous, almost reminding of a police academy type program. Now, and it comes in different levels, and each level has a different focus. The first level for watch and guard focuses more on just the basic principles and the concepts, and in the same time you will learn, receive training in first aid, CPR, emergency response, and get a very basic level of field training. On the next level, you'll focus on the more hands-on aspects. You'll learn the basic concepts of general law and security procedures, concepts of community policing. Yes, you will receive firearms training because it's in preparation for times where lethal force is required. But you'll also learn self-defense and defending yourself with non-lethal weapons. And in that case, we're talking primarily about mace. Now, in the same regard, executive security officers do have to be trained in general law because they can't operate outside of the law. They are trained in self-defense and firearms training as well. We see that very obviously in the case with the United States Secret Service. And just as well, physical agility is important as well. But where they differ, I found in my research, is that executive security also has a certain level of expertise as far as cybersecurity. Now, Pinkerton, which is an executive security organization that has existed since the late 1800s, they employ what is called a technical surveillance countermeasure service. Now, what this means is that they work in electronic debugging. And a lot of companies have come to them for this service, debugging for events that, public events in public places, relocation. They hire them to offer debugging services before they move into a location, as well as debugging before executive board meetings. Just scroll down for the visual aid here. Now, as far as technology, the technology used between the two security groups is somewhat similar, but it operates at a different pace. Now, for anyone who's ever attended either a government speech or they've watched a movie premiere on the red carpet, on TV, or they've been, even outside of a club when a celebrity arrives, you can see the security officers and executive security communicating with either a radio, a walkie-talkie, or earpieces, but you notice that they are in a constant state of communication with each other. And you notice when they are on the job, if you will, they sort of they have a rather imposing body language. You see them, you know exactly what they're there for. They are not there to be super interacted with by the public. They realistically, based on the type of work that they do and the type of clientele that they have, they are there to appear as counter threats. They're there for lack of a better term, they're there to appear as tough guys. And that's another difference between executive security and watch and guard security. Again, the technology that's used to communicate is similar, but they don't operate in the same way and in the same body language and realistically in the same pace as executive security. Watch and guard security officers are more on a state of patrol than in a state of counter threat. Yes, they do use radios to communicate, but they're not in quite as constant of a state of communication as executive security is. They're more focused on doing their patrol. And if there's not an issue, then there's not much to communicate with. They continue on their patrol. And as I said, where the executive officer, or the executive security officer is more in an imposing, tough guy body language, the watch and guard security is more in a pace of, in terms of body language, exudes a face of, just professionalism and kindness. They are the type of person, and they want to give off the persona, because they do interact so much more with the public than executive security does. They want to give off a presence to the public that doesn't seem quite as imposing. You feel safe, but you don't feel imposed upon. And by doing so, it's a persona in which the public won't be hesitant to approach the guard with any issue, with any problems that they have or any questions that they have. And in general, they're not afraid to interact with them. And that's the goal and the point behind the body language that you see from watch and guard security officers. So we've come to the end of this presentation. I thank you very much for your time. I hope this was informative. It definitely was very informing and a fun project to research, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.